once again to Compliance Clips. Today, we are speaking with Kerri Wirachowsky of the CVSA. Kerri presently serves as the Director of Inspection Programs at the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. In her current capacity at the CVSA, she plays a pivotal role in shaping the training programs for commercial vehicle inspections across North America. Kerri is instrumental in the development of policies, bulletins, and training of the North American Standard out-of-service criteria. Kerri started her career as a commercial vehicle inspector in Ontario, Canada, and she is a certified national and provincial vehicle inspector instructor. In 2001, Kerri was the winner of the CVSA North American Inspectors Championship Challenge, and she subsequently went on to be co-chair of the event from 2002 to 2007. In 2007, Kerri assumed the role of chairman of the CVSA Vehicle Committee. Kerri's contributions, dedication, and passion have generated her accolades and recognition from the industry, and she has received multiple awards, including the Peace Officer Exemplary Service Medal, the Queen's Jubilee Award, and the CVSA Presidential Award. Please join us now in the first of several interviews with Kerri, where we discuss the CVSA and lots of things commercial motor vehicle.
Well, welcome, Kerri. How are you doing today? And thanks for joining us here on Compliance Clips.
I am great, and thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, good deal. So it's been a while since we've last conversed. I know we met at some functions and whatnot, but I know a lot of people viewing this episode are going to be going, Kerri, I remember Kerri. Wasn't she with the MTO or something? So let's do a little background check for those people that don't know who Kerri is. And do me a big favor. How do you pronounce your last name again so I don't screw it up twice?
Wirachowsky.
Wirachowsky.
Yes.
So Wirachowsky. Wirachowsky.
Yeah. Or where's the house key?
Where's the house key? Where's the house key? I like that. That'll work good. So give us a little background check. Bring everybody up to snuff as to what Kerri's been up to.
Yeah, so for those of you who've never heard of me, I did work for the MTO for 30 years. I started at the Putnam Scales, and then I moved out of there and went into area patrol and ended up in St. Catharines in head office. And 7 years ago, I quit my job. I did not retire. I quit, and I went to the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. And I started off there as the director of roadside inspections. And I was the director of roadside inspections for about 4 or 5 years. And then just recently, as of about a year and a half ago, my title changed to director of inspection programs, because it's taking in roadside inspections along with the ever so popular autonomous driverless vehicle inspections. So now it's 2 different inspection programs completely. And I have been hanging out with CVSA for 7 years. I can't believe it's been that long, actually.
Wow, God, 7 years. Yeah, it's just like the seventh inning.
Seems like yesterday to me.
Yeah, it does. I can just imagine. I can imagine. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of myths around what CVSA is, what they do, what they have, what enforcement, whatnot. How about we enlighten the group as to what CVSA, what it stands for, and what does it truly mean? What power do they have?
Right. So the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, what CVSA stands for, is actually an association, and we're stationed in Washington, D.C., but it is an alliance made up of the 3 countries, Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And every state, province, and territory are members of CVSA, but I will tell you the bulk of our members are motor carriers. So we have a huge pile of members that are, and when I talk motor carriers, I'm also talking insurance companies, consultants, ELD providers, anybody that's related to the transportation industry sort of in any way can be and are members of CVSA. And the reason, so we're not a regulatory body. We're in some respects, we are the ones that when regulations come out and we need to make them make more sense or we need to understand them, then we go to the federal government and try and make sense of things to kind of just whittle it down so that the motor carrier industry and or the inspectors themselves can understand what it is that they have to do. So the biggest thing that we're responsible for, that I'm responsible for within the confines of CVSA, is the out of service criteria, the inspection procedures, the operational policies, and all of those things that inspectors use at roadside. So we keep all of that stuff up to date. Inspection bulletins and operational policies, they get updated pretty much whenever the committees get together. So the committee structure within CVSA, there are 10 standing committees. I chaired one for 10 years when I worked for Ontario. It was the vehicle committee. So when your vehicle's going down the road and you get put out of service for something vehicle related, that was the committee that comes up with where that line in the sand is between staying and going. Okay. We don't make the regulation to determine when you get a ticket or when you get a violation. That's the regulators. That's the Ontario government. That's Transport Canada. That's FMCSA. Those are the regulators. We take that regulation and determine when can you stay, when can you go, and how should an inspector check a truck so that it's the same and uniform all the time.
Right. So that's where it brings in that terminology I hear a lot of people use, out of service criteria.
Right.
That's your stay, that's your go, right?
Yeah.
So,
and that changes every April 1st of every year. So I'm working on that right now for next year.
Okay. So this would be updates to that criteria, may bring something that currently is not an out of service criteria, and it may be going, we're going to make it an out of service criteria or something along that line.
Or the other way around in some cases.
Okay.
Sometimes it goes the other way. Yeah. And sometimes it could be based on technology. It could be based on a fatal collision that happened of some sort of component or some sort of thing that has been ignored. A good one and a good example of a few years ago is the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse in the United States. It's something new. So there was no out of service for the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. So that was added in a few years ago because there was a new program that required an out of service condition for it, right?
Sure.
The biggest one that I can remember when I was chairing the committee was driveline drive shaft. There was no out of service for any conditions of driveline drive shaft. But we had, obviously, you guys know, your driveline falls out, you can have fatalities, you can have a lot of things go wrong. So we got all of this data and we get all this information. It took 3 years with working with industry, working with the motor carriers, working with everybody else to come up with where is that line in the sand. But if you look at the today's out of service criteria, there's 2 pages of out of service criteria for driveline drive shaft conditions. Whereas when I started inspecting a truck, a driveline drive shaft was good for one thing, shimmying myself down the truck, because nobody told me how to inspect it and nobody told me what a violation criteria was. And inspectors check what they're taught to inspect, and they really shouldn't inspect anymore. So if it's not in the regulation and it's not in the out of service, they don't really pay a whole lot of attention to it.
Right.
So that's an example of something that came over time.
Sure. Well, and I imagine also some of these out of service criteria are created through some of these large investigations of a large crash, and medical examiners come out and say, hey, here's some recommendations, here's some best practices. So in order to put better controls in place around those regulations, hence where you come up with the out of service criteria process.
In some cases, I know when I was chairing vehicle committee years ago, we got some recommendations from the NTSB that had gone and done fatal collisions on dump truck, for instance. And that same dump truck it had gone down a hill and went through a store and killed people, and it had 3 brakes out of adjustment. And then when they did the background, they realized that those same 3 brakes were out of adjustment 4 times. 2 annuals, 2 roadside inspections. And of course, that's what triggered and resulted in us doing an advisory on inspection reports for automatic slack adjusters, that just adjusting up a slack adjuster when it's automatic is not good enough. Because generally speaking, when your automatic slack adjuster is not adjusting, it's because something else is wrong in the foundation brakes. Camshaft bushings are worn out, yoke pins are seized, something else is going on. And way back then, technicians didn't know that. So they were just taking a slack adjuster off, pitching it in the garbage because it wasn't adjusting, putting on a new one, and the same problem would result over and over again. So those are things that come to light through investigations, like you said, and we do get recommendations from NTSB all the time when events happen and they do investigations. Sometimes we take their advice and sometimes we can't, but we always look at them for sure.
So obviously you are part of this funnel process, obviously, when you have all kinds of different bodies coming together to bring ideas of best practices, how to better manage things. You're part of that funnel or conduit of getting that information through, get it down to the regulators, helping to set those best practices and, as we've just mentioned, out of service criteria to prevent future major crashes from happening.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, I remember working in Ontario, and I remember this like it was yesterday. And I went to this training for media training, and the guy said to me, "You have a noble job." And I said, "I do." And he said, "Yeah." And I think I was 23 at the time or something. And he said, "Yeah, you do." He says, "Because nobody likes to see you." And I said, "Yeah, you're right." And he goes, "And it's a thankless job." And that's very true. You work for the MTO on the side of the road. No truck driver is thrilled when you pull him over. I tried to make him thrilled by the time he left, but nonetheless, at the beginning, they don't want to waste, in their mind, it's a waste of time. So they don't want to spend the time. But when I found one of the first things that I saw when I started my job was I went to a collision with one of my training officers, and a brake drum had come out from under a truck and decapitated a woman and melted into the back of the car. That's not something you forget in your lifetime. And the thing is, every single time I found a broken brake drum, in my mind, I'd go save the life. But nobody knows.
Right.
Nobody knows. And the only ones they know about, and Ontario is the prime example, the wheel separations that happened back in the 90s, like when those came off, it's like, oh, regulate. Well, sometimes it's not regulate because we already have the regulations. It's training those drivers to do better trip inspections. It's training the industry to know what to look for to prevent that from ever happening, because I'd be pretty lucky to see every truck on the highway in my career, because I didn't, but a driver does, right? Yeah. So it was a lot of that too. And a lot of when I worked for the Ontario government, I loved going out and doing exactly what I'm doing right now, talking to industry and talking to drivers, because if you know what you're doing, you actually don't need the enforcement people that much.
Yeah.
So I have to apologize for the abrupt termination of today's interview, but we are trying to keep these clips to under 15 minutes. And as you can tell, Kerri is a very passionate and informed speaker. We're going to pick this interview up pretty well where we leave off today at our next session, and we're going to get into some even more interesting information about the CVSA and what they can do to help carriers and industry participants meet their compliance requirements. Thank you so much for being here.